Today's lesson is going to cover Chapter 2, Key Issue 4, Why Might Population Increase in the Future? First, we're going to look at population and resources. Then we are going to look into the possible futures of population, epidemiology, and family. Geography can help us predict the future population and health trends. The size of Earth's population and the natural increase leads us to believe that in the future, there may be too many of us. But some believe that Earth's population may decline in the future. An important theorist you should know is Thomas Malthus. Malthus was an English economist, but he had predicted that population would exceed the food supply back in the 18th century. Malthus claimed that the population was growing much more rapidly than Earth's food supply because population was increased geometrically, whereas food supply increased arithmetically. Malthus came to this conclusion a few decades after England was the first to enter stage 2. He argued that population growth would press against available resources in every country unless there was some moral restraint produced to lower crude birth rates, or maybe unless disease, famine, war, or other diseases produced higher crude death rates. There are many critics who believe that Malthus was proven wrong to some extent, mainly because humans have been able to come up with innovative ways to produce more resources. Neo-Malthusians today believe that the theory from Malthus actually rings true even more in today's context. They argue that the world population growth is outstripping a wide variety of resources, not just food production. Neo-Malthusians paint a frightening picture of a world in which billions of people are engaged in a desperate search for food, water, and energy. Take a look at figure 2-34. This graph is located on page 66 of your textbook. This showcases Malthus's theory. Malthus expected population to grow more rapidly than food supply. The graph shows that if in 2000 the population of place were 1 unit and the amount of resources were 1 unit, then according to the theory, in 2100, the place would have around 15 billion people, but only 5 billion tons of grain. There are many critics of the Malthus theory, however. For example, critics believe that we have the ability to expand resources and have proved to do that already. Even though some resources are decreasing, other resources have been available to replace them. Let's take a look at figure 2-37 on page 67 of your textbook. This graph shows the Malthus theory applied to India. This graph actually proves the opposite of the Malthusian theory. And what it's demonstrating is that the production of wheat and rice has actually increased more rapidly than the population has. The next topic we're going to cover is the possible stage 5 of the demographic transition, looking at the futures of population. What we would see in a possible stage 5 of the demographic transition is a world population decline. So this is where we have a very low crude birth rate, an increasing crude death rate, and a declining natural increase rate. Take a look at figure 2-38 located on page 68 of your textbook. This is a graph of the United Nations estimate of future population. The high forecast in red assumes that the current total fertility rate will continue in the future. The medium forecast in blue anticipates a modest decline in the total fertility rate. And the low forecast in brown assumes a sharp decline in the total fertility rate. The United Nations estimates that world population in 2100 could increase to 15.8 billion or decline to 6.2 billion. The UN's high variant is followed. World population would more than double by 2100. If the low variant is followed, then world population would actually decline. What is your prediction of where the future population will be? Do you think it will be high, medium, or low? This is figure 2-39, also located on page 68 of your textbook. Take a look at the added stage 5 to the demographic transition model. Again, stage 5 of the demographic transition would be characterized by a negative natural increase rate because the accrued death rate would be greater than the accrued birth rate. If the demographic transition model were to include a stage 5, Japan is going to be one of the world's first countries to reach it. We will be watching a very short documentary in class looking at the unique challenges that Japan faces with its population. Check out these two population graphs of Japan in 1950 and the projection of Japan in 2050. This figure 2-40 is located on page 69 of your textbook. Japan faces a population structure with a lot of older people and very few working age folks to support that transition. The next section is on epidemiologic futures. Looking at stage 5 of the epidemiologic transition, infections and parasitic diseases are going to re-emerge. This is what's going to place the biggest threat on population that could lead to a decline. There will be 3 contributing factors to this. Evolution, where we build antibiotic resistance, they're not going to be as effective. Poverty, which is the lack of access to medicine, and connections. Further globalization is going to further contribute to the transmission of these diseases. Take a look at the map on figure 2-42 on page 70 of your textbook. Deaths from tuberculosis are found primarily in poorer countries that are unable to pay for the expensive treatment. This next map, figure 2-43, located on page 71 of your textbook, shows AIDS at the highest rates of infection in sub-Saharan Africa, as well as Russia. HIV has diffused around the world through people moving and traveling. So again, this is an example of relocation diffusion. Figure 2-44, located on the same page, shows AIDS and international arrivals, specifically in the United States. Because AIDS arrived in the United States primarily through air travelers, the distribution of AIDS closely matches the distribution of international air passengers. Lastly, we are going to talk about family futures. What causes crude birth rates to decrease? Remember that there are a few things that can be done to decrease the crude birth rate. First, expanding education. Next, expanding healthcare. Another one would be empowering women, ensuring they have opportunities, access to education, also expanded access to health services. And lastly, higher investments in children so that that cycle continues and the crude birth rate continues to decrease. The list I provided is considered a list of foundational things that can be done to try and decrease the crude birth rate. However, there are also more direct ways, especially ones that might be more effective immediately in developing countries. That would be through the implementation of family planning. More directly looking at contraception, which is another word for birth control, may not always be available, but if a supply is expanded and provided and made readily available, it can help decrease the crude birth rate pretty fast. Take a look at figure 2-45, located on page 72 of your textbook. This map shows the crude birth rate change from 1990 to 2015. What you will notice is that the crude birth rate has declined in all but a handful of countries. Declines have been most rapid in Latin America and South and Southwest Asia. In this map, figure 2-47 on page 73 of your textbook, we can see the percentage of women using family planning. More than 2/3 of couples in developed countries use a family planning method. Family planning varies widely in developing countries. China reports the world's highest rate of family planning, and the lowest rates are in sub-Saharan Africa. Take a look at figure 2-48, located on page 73 of your textbook. These pie charts show preferred methods of family planning, and you can see that they do vary from place to place. Take a look at the preferred methods in Germany. Take a look at preferred methods in China and compare that to Nigeria. Birth control pills are the most popular family planning method in Germany, whereas female sterilization, as well as the IUD, is more popular in China. As you'll see, a high 85% rate in Nigeria is not using any method. That gives you some perspective. This is the end of Chapter 2, Key Issue 4. Please return to Google Classroom to watch our short documentary on the unique challenges that Japan faces on population.